Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jared Stoltmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Active Turnkey podcast. I'm
Welcome.
your host, Jared Stoltmeister.
Welcome back, Jared.
Tom is excited. He was so ready to record this today.
I was all ready. I came to Jared with a list of all these things I wanted to do. I'm just kidding. This is all Jared's idea, everybody. So if this turns out to be like the best episode ever, it's all Jared.
Wow. And if not,
it's all me.
It's okay. Tom, what a guy. He'll fall on the sword for his team. That's leadership 101. Well, it's not a leadership podcast, but that is what it looks like, guys. So thank you for joining us.
So Jared had this great idea to come and have like some short series, and these next couple podcasts are going to be a little bit shorter than our normal average podcast you're probably used to, seeing us go for 45 minutes or so. We're going to kind of make these a little bit shorter. Yeah. So keep that in mind when you're listening to these next couple podcasts.
Yeah, so we talked about recently that Active Turnkey is a viable option again today. Now, it's not easy finding deals still to fit. We have to make sure the numbers work, but it is an option. And so for a long time it wasn't, and it wasn't really worth having conversations over. But now it is, as far as what we can offer to our customers. And so we wanted to bring out quite a bit into what we would say an Active Turnkey series. So focusing on specific points throughout the process of evaluation and process and things like that. And so this will be the first episode.
And we're going to go through these things really in detail as much as we possibly can. So this is going to... A lot of podcasts out there is a lot of pie and sky.
Sure.
It's a lot of like economic driven. It's a lot of like what's going on in the market. And we like to do those too sometimes. But I just want to warn you, this is going to be very detailed. It's going to kind of be like almost like a lesson.
Like a workshop.
Like a workshop.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. And if you guys enjoy that, but really like the whole reason why we're doing this, we want to make it easy for you to be able to figure out, hey, is this a deal for me or not? Is this something that I think is going to be able to work for me? And maybe you're just doing this on your own. Hey, that's fine. We don't think that we're the only operator out there. And we've always said if you can manage rental properties, if you can buy these on your own, do it. We are trying to help educate you to do it on your own as well. Now, you're going to have to bring some of your own labor. You're going to have to bring some of your own knowledge. That's part of what this podcast is going to help you with, is some of that knowledge.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to work. That's the difference. Do you want to be a passive investor, or do you want to be an active investor? And that's what this Active Turnkey process kind of like molds the two together, and it lets you kind of be active, it lets you kind of be passive, and it really lets you work with somebody who's done over 1,000 turnkey properties in the last 10 years. So that's what we bring to the table, and we're excited today. Today, I think we're going to talk about kind of that first step, right? So in order for something to work for Burr, you have to establish what the ARV is, right, Jared?
Yeah. Now, this is assuming you've already verified your market, right? You already know where you want to be. You like a specific town. You've already established that part.
You have certain operators you might want to work with, or maybe you're going to manage your own, and maybe it's going to be in your own backyard.
Yeah, so all those, there's so many different avenues even before you get to this, but establishing the after repair value. This may seem simple, okay? It may seem obvious, but it really isn't. And it's amazing. Just see how listings or wholesalers or whatever, it's all over the place. After repair values can be all over.
Well, they can, because after repaired value is really just an opinion.
That's good.
I do want to make sure everybody knows that.
That's a good point.
ARV, also known as after repaired value. So just so you guys got that acronym, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that doesn't know what ARV means.
I actually just learned that just now.
Jared just learned what ARV means on this podcast. Wow.
ARV. I've always said ARV.
ARV. You want to know the ARV.
Yeah.
No, so the after repaired value is an opinion. Even value. If you think about value, it is really, it's worth a lot more to one person than it is to somebody else, right? The exact same piece of land.
Yeah.
If you're just gonna let's just use land for instance. So let's just use 40 acres of land. And Jared, you might go out and you look at 40 acres of land and you're like, okay, this is worth $100,000 to me. And everybody asks you, okay, Jared, why is this worth $100,000 to you? You're like, okay, well, maybe I could hunt on it. Maybe I'm going to buy it and I'm going to hope that in the future it's going to be worth more money. Maybe I'm going to rent out this land. You know, there's lots of different uses for that land. But if I go to maybe say a farmer, that farmer may say, hey, this land is right next to my other 200 acres and I'm going to buy this chunk of 50 acres right next to my land. It might be worth more to him than it is to you.
Yeah.
So, you know, first of all, I think we have to start there when you start talking about value. They say the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I have 2 daughters, and I'm trying to teach them this at this point in their life, is that, you know, beauty sometimes is relative.
It's true.
Beauty,
it's so good.
And so is value. And really, like, so for instance, I believe this is partly why we've helped Gary so much, because we've changed some of the value of what, number one, the perceived value is. Number 2, what the other values have kind of comped out at in the neighborhood, but also rent. You know, so if you can rent, you can get cash flow from a property. That also all goes into like that thought process of, hey, how much is something worth?
Yeah.
The other thing that we will touch on a little bit is interest rates. Interest rates do affect value because they affect what that net positive income might be, based on how much you pay for it versus how much you put down versus what your you have your payment, your PI, your principal and interest payment. Taxes and insurance aren't going to change much with interest rates, but that interest rate does change sometimes that value, which is interesting because we're being now how the market shifted for us a little bit already. We're seeing some of those values that were kind of maybe too high. We told people for a long time that we're selling our houses retail because we were getting $50,000 more.
True.
And honestly, I kind of felt bad. I actually believe there were turnkey buyers that may have been willing to buy those properties at those what I thought were inflated prices, but I just didn't feel right. Yeah. Selling those properties for $190,000, $200,000, $210,000 for houses that would rent for $1,400. Right. They may have looked okay on a pro forma. Somebody might have wanted them because everything was so hot. But at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure that if I was going to sell a property to an investor, I was going to manage for long term. That hey, you're going to get a good price. I know, but interest rates. That's how interest rates kind of change the game as well when it comes to value.
No, that's interesting. And you said perceived value, so there could be emotion there. Depending on a seller, they may, like you said, you're talking about a farmer and location. Well, a seller could have their perception of value, and that perception is, and one thing that we could talk about is, well, my house is like their house.
Right, yeah.
And in many cases, it's not.
That's true.
But they think, oh, well, my house has 3 beds. My house has 1 bath. My house has 1,008 square feet. So, thus, same price. So I should be able to list my house.
It must be worth the exact same price, Jared.
Yeah, but also investors can do the same thing. And so right away we're talking about perceived value, and you need to know your strategy. And so, like for us, one reason we can spout out what we think our ARV is based upon the market and everything, but we also know what the house is going to look like at the beginning. So we can establish right away and evaluate that deal based on what it's finished. And but someone else's finish might be different than our finishes. You have to compare those things, hence comparables. And so that's what you do. You use sold comparables. Oftentimes in a like when we first went into Gary, there were hardly any solds, so that was difficult. But you typically don't want to use listings, active listings. You like to try to use sold comparables, preferably within the last 6 months, within a half mile if possible.
Yeah, so now Jared's getting into
I'm getting into it.
How do you actually evaluate this today? Like how?
Yeah.
I kind of first started talking about the whole concept of value and kind of where it comes from and how to think about value. And now Jared's going to kind of get right into how to. So what do we do, Jared, when we go out into a property and we're going to buy a property, right? We are buying property specifically thinking about an investor in mind.
Correct. Yep.
And we're thinking, how big is the house? What is the bed, bathroom count? Just some of the things you already mentioned, the square footage. And then one of the first things that we do is we will compare it to what other actives and solds and even pendings. I like to see all three. I think, the market 2 years ago, or the market in 2020, 2021, even 2019, 2018, we would have only looked at solds. We wouldn't have even looked at actives. We wouldn't have looked at pendings that much. Yeah. It really would have all be on solds. I do believe in different parts of the market cycle that those actives and solds are more valuable.
Sure.
And in today's market, I believe that those actives and solds are more valuable. They may be as valuable as a sold, because if you have a bunch of solds that are maybe $50,000 higher than everything active, well, you kind of know that market is not going to be what those solds say they are. So you have to be honest about what that's going to be.
Excellent point.
So and then we look at, hey, does this house really compare? So yes, bedroom and bathroom is an important part of it, right? Square footage is an important part, but also what is the type of home? So if you have a ranch versus a 2-story, hey, that's different. There's some similarities, but it's still different. What type of a home is it? Is it a manufactured home or is it a stick-built home? Those are going to be two different comparables. Does it have a basement? Does it have a garage? Does it, is it on a busy street? What do the houses around it look like? Because just because you have a comparable, your block may not be that good. You might have a block where every house in that whole street is vacant, but all the comparables you're pulling are off of really nice streets that most people live in those houses. So all of these things have to come into play. It's not just one thing. And that's why I think sometimes, we work with realtors, so I'm not trying to be down on realtors, but sometimes realtors kind of get a skewed view because they only look at CMA. They only look at data. They don't really go look at the house. They don't go look at the neighborhood. They don't go understand what's really going on here. And it goes both ways. Sometimes a house is worth way more than what that data may say. Sometimes a house is worth less than what that data says. So data is important. It's probably one of the most important key components of looking at, the solds, looking at the, the market. The market does matter because inevitably most people that are doing active turnkey are going to want to refinance the property. And that's why we're talking about after repaired value.
Right.
Now, to be honest with you, if you're a cash buyer and you're happy with the cash flow that a cash investment of, say, $120,000 is going to give you with a house that's renting for $1,250, we have a lot of buyers that are they're happy with that. And active they used to pay $120, $125 for these turnkey. They may be all into these deals now because our active turnkey program does require for you to bring cash. So some people just stay in these deals cash, and you might only be in this deal $100,000 now instead of $120,000. And at that point, wouldn't you agree? If you're okay with the cash flow, the after repair value doesn't really matter unless you're trying to build wealth, right? Because in the long haul, at some point, maybe 10, 20, 30, maybe 5 years, who knows? Down the road, you might want to sell this property. Right. You might want to 1031. You might want to give it to your kids. Whatever it is. At some point, that value is going to come into play. So that's why we're talking about ARV today, after repaired value. I think so what are some other things, Jared, that you can think of right off the top of your bat that you kind of get into, how are you looking at after repaired value and why is this so important?
Well, again, active turnkey, the biggest there's two big issues, right? We talked about all the time. The two main risks. The first one is repairs, right? Extras that you just unforeseen, they happen, but you don't know what that is until they come. You can't project an extra. You just don't know it happens. But the second one is one that you have more control over than you think, and that's the appraiser, because in the end, it doesn't matter what I think the house is worth. It matters what that appraiser is going to evaluate it at. And so I need to, when we're evaluating this, our question is, what will this appraise for? right? I mean, that's the question. It's not,
Right.
so even beyond the ARV, it's what will this appraiser say? And so when we're looking at comps, that's what we're checking. We're saying we're trying to poke holes into our own, like like our process internally. We'll have one of our acquisition guys send us a deal. Hey, we're right here, we're close. Here's the numbers. Here's where we're at. Here are the comps. Here's the stats in the house, and we're doing our own underwriting process, poking holes in their numbers. Sometimes they're spot on, but our goal is to say, what is this going to appraise for with that because that's the real number that our active turnkey guys are going to be concerned about. Mm-hmm. And so my assessment, my idea, again, we're letting emotion in the end, we do need to let the numbers dictate it, and that's the hard information. That's what the appraiser is going to use when the time comes. And so you want to use what he uses. And I think the second thing I would say is there are times when you can project future changes, but when we do BRRRR, we use what's available today to evaluate the deal. It's dangerous to say, well, 6 months from now, X is going to happen, whether it be lower or higher. We just don't know. All we do have today is the data that's available and that we do believe that appraiser is going to use in the next 6 months.
And I like to project a lot longer down the road. Like I'm looking at things so this is kind of, again, more into opinion. This is kind of more into my philosophy. But when I'm looking at a property, I'm looking at what is this house going to be worth 3 years from now? Or 5 years from now, or 7 years from now. If I'm doing active turnkey, if I'm doing BRRRR myself personally, that's what I'm looking for. I just want to let you guys know that. And sometimes we send deals out and we say, hey, like I know we got some deals coming down the pipe right now where it's like, I believe these are the houses that we would have sold for $200,000 a year ago. And we may be selling these turnkey for like $150,000, $160,000. But these are great houses, like right by the hospital, like built nice brick, like beautiful houses. If they were in Munster or Crown Point, Indiana, they might be worth $500,000. So like I'm looking at not just today's value. And I'm also looking at future value. So just so you guys know, it's kind of again philosophy I'm getting into. I'm glad Jared brought up two things, and we always say this, like you have two big risks when you do active turnkey. You have repairs, and you have the appraisal. And I want you to know that's why I believe you're getting the deal you're getting. So you're getting the deal you're getting. You're getting this under market value because you're taking on that risk. And that's kind of what we do. Like this is how we make money. This is exactly how we make money, is that we are taking on risk every time we buy a property. And every time we buy a property, we don't know what's going to happen. And the active turnkey process, from the repair standpoint, we're passing on that to you. Like we have done upfront research. We've done the same research, maybe even a little bit more due diligence research than we would have on our own properties before we buy our own properties. I would agree with that. We're doing more research for you before we sell you the property than we do for our own. We have a full scope already ready to go. And we say, this is what we believe at this point. We've already done a lot of due diligence. This is what we believe it's going to cost you. We always recommend that you just kind of plan for about $2,000 in incidentals. Sometimes we don't use it at all. Sometimes it's the $2,000. Sometimes it goes way over it. But you got to know, and you got to be willing to take that risk in order to do this. And then the second thing is, and the reason why, like Jared said, we're talking about after repaired value today, is because if you're going to do BRRRR, the goal is to try to get out as much money as you possibly can. And I want you to know that that's our goal for you too. But you have to be willing to not make that happen. You have to be willing. Worst case scenario is that doesn't happen. And I want you to know that I would say 20%, from our experience, 20% of the time, these houses don't appraise for what we believe that they're going to happen, what they're going to appraise for. I mean, I'm being totally transparent with this. I don't think it's 20% of the time they appraise for more. I think in the last 2 or 3 years they have. But like previously, before the last 2 or 3 years, I would say it's probably not 20% of the time that they appraise for more, but I would say probably in the 5 to 10% of the time they appraise for more. And 5, 10. I mean, we've seen as much as $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 more. But Jared has one himself.
It was that way.
But that's the reason why after repaired value is so important. And I don't want you to think that you have to get it right 100% of the time, because you're not. It's just you're not going to get it right. But I think you should have a good sense of how we're coming up with our after repaired value, why we say it is what we say it is, and also having yourself coming up with your own types of numbers. And just know the reason why for active turnkey you want it is because, and then let's just say we say a house is going to be worth 120, 130, and it appraises for 120. Let's just say we think it's going to be worth 130, and the house comes in appraised at 120. Well, we thought, maybe you were all into this property $100,000, and so maybe now at 120, maybe you can only pull out 95,000 of that. So now instead of you being into this property maybe nothing, you're into it $5,000.
Yeah.
Maybe and so I want you to understand it's not the full amount. It's not the full amount of. It's not like if we say it's going to appraise for 130 and it appraises for 120, that you're automatically into this property $10,000 more out of your pocket.
Right.
Does that make sense? It's really only 80% of that,
right?
Or 20% of that. I'm sorry. So if you're
right.
depending on your bank, obviously banks right now are 75 and 80%. It seems like they'll do loan to value on the cash out refis. But that's kind of what we're talking about today, and that's why after repaired value is so important. And you want to do as best as you can. But again, I want everybody to understand the risk that you're taking with active turnkey.
Yeah.
But we believe, I still believe it's the best way to buy real estate.
Yeah.
I believe it, because without that risk, you're also not getting that extra, that extra bump. You're not, like we did this with, I don't know, hundreds of properties 4, 5, 6 years ago. And the guys that did what we said for them to do, the guys that, I tell people buy, 1, get to 4 as fast as you can, get to 10 then as fast as you can. And really, I think most people's goal should be at least 20. Like if you're going to get into turnkey rentals, I don't think fiddling around with 1 or 2 is really a great thing. I just don't. Like I'd much rather you get into 4 at least, and then try to get to 20 as fast as possible. And the guys that got to 20 and they did what we told them to do, are sitting really, really pretty right now.
Did really well. Yeah.
And some of these, they didn't do so well on. There are a couple of those properties out of 20, maybe 1 or 2 didn't appraise even close to what we said. Maybe 1 or 2 appraised for more than what we said. And most of them appraised really close to that range. Some of them, they stayed into cash.
Yep.
And, then, when markets change, you kind of always go through these market cycles. Yeah. After repaired value changes. Yeah. Weekly, monthly, yearly. It goes up and down. It's not a straight line.
Yeah. I mean, we had, I've had situations where investors came back and maybe the house appraised anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 below our projected ARV. And I try to tell them, that's not awful.
No, not at all.
That's not really bad. I mean, for us to say 6 months ago that this house would appraise and we missed it by $5,000, that's not bad.
No, not at all.
Especially when we reviewed the appraiser, I'm like, look, the guy, maybe he could have used this house, maybe he didn't. But for us to be that close 6 months ago, that's pretty good. Now, if we're talking $20,000 and there could be reasons for it, and at that point we're like, okay, wow, we got to figure this out. Where's
sometimes
this issue?
it's just an appraiser is even an opinion.
Yes.
Sometimes they don't like the areas that we're in.
That's happening.
Sometimes there is some things I think that aren't right that happen sometimes, and I think at the end of the day you have to understand that banks don't want to necessarily give out cash, and when you're doing a cash out refi, that's what they're doing. They're handing you cash. It's much easier for them to do a refinance with another lender that's already loaned you the money. Like the chances of you getting the full amount back are much greater when there's already a loan in place versus, and the chances are much greater if you're purchasing it. So like we had almost zero problem with our turnkeys over the years with appraisers. So we're already kind of into this a lot longer than we thought we were going to be.
Yeah,
into this.
well, I think what's interesting about that point though is that it's easier for the appraiser to appraise the turnkey because there's that contract. It sets the price. Now they have something to gauge. When active turnkey, that's where the risk of a low, but also the opportunity for high, because now they don't know what to compare it to. It's like they wouldn't go if we're selling a house for 120 in active turnkey. They wouldn't go over that if they didn't think they had to, and so I think that's one thing. But in the end, when it comes to the after repair value, the ARV, every everything you do is based off that number now. Every decision you make is like, you start with the ARV, like any formula you create, you start with after repair value. That's just what you do. And so you have to make sure, and poke holes in your argument, do the underwriting that's necessary to establish that. And again, for us, we're doing our best to project what the appraiser is going to say and what he's going to use to establish that.
And that's just from our experience. I don't know what else we can get into. You know, I do know that there's some differences on when you go to the appraisal. The only other thing that I know we haven't mentioned is like year built. So like if you do not want to, you know, compare something that's been built in the last 20 years versus something that was built 50 years ago. I think bed bath count, you know, what street it's street by street sometimes does matter a little bit. Not as much in most of our areas, but it can matter a little bit. You know, sometimes it's everything that everybody wants in a property, right? So like if you have to think, like, you don't want to buy a house just to buy a house. You don't want to buy a house just because you think you're going to get a rent. It's like, it's not all numbers. Some of it is, but there is a lot of emotion that goes into it. And the same emotion that a renter is going to go in and say, oh, I want to rent this house, is the same emotion that a buyer is going to go in and say, I want to buy this house. It's the same emotion that an appraiser is going to bring in to that property. And again, that's why area matters. That's why location matters. That's why the feel of the outside even matters. The layout of the land matters. The layout of the house matters. All those things, they really do matter when it comes to this final, you know, number that is actually established as what does the after repair value. And I'll be honest with you, we've done 2,000 deals in our career here over the last 15 years or so. And I will tell you that I was probably right like 50% of the time. Like, you're just not right. Sometimes you're way off low. I've probably been low as much as I've been high.
And Tom's conservative by nature anyway. He doesn't want to drive up that ARV, so that could be one.
Not what I'm buying. No way.
Right.
I would love to drive up the ARV when I'm selling.
Absolutely.
But you know, so I've been wrong low just as much as I've been wrong high. And Jared's right. We do, as a company stance, want to do the, you know, we want to be conservative. When it comes to this. So I don't know if there's any much more we got to talk about after repaired value, but
I mean, I think one thing you mentioned was, you know, you got the emotional side, and so you can't just be the emotional. You can't just say, hey, make it up to where everything is just how's it look and what is it? Because I mean, you could totally destroy your budget that way. So you have to. So you do have the emotional, and you also have the data, and you need them both. And so this part of this step is evaluating the data primarily, and location, all that stuff, which we'll get into another podcast. But like, what's going on, and what is this house worth all fixed up, and what is that appraiser going to appraise?
And then one more thing that we should probably get into: when it comes after repaired value, what you're putting in the house is going to matter.
Absolutely.
So like, if you're just going to go in there and you're just going to paint, and you're not really doing much, you're not really putting in a new kitchen, you're not really putting in new flooring, you're not really putting in a new roof, or you're not doing new whatever, like, you just fill in the blank. Like, the more new you do and the better it looks, and the better quality of products that you're putting in the property. You know, there's a statement that I heard, I don't know, about 10 years ago, and it's kind of stuck with me: over improving. You go into some of these neighborhoods like we have, and a lot of people would say we're over improving. So we're improving over what the average is for that area. And that's a way that we have used to help raise values in neighborhoods. But also, what's awesome, and we didn't realize this was going to happen the way it did, is it also improves rents significantly.
Big time.
It's not like, you know, you might just improve rent $50, $60, $100. It might go $400, $500 in the next 4 or 5 years, because now there's a whole area that's kind of changed, and now every house in that area now has nicer finishes. So now it becomes more attractive to a larger pool of people that might want to live there. So
well, that goes back to what I said before. We know at Olson Group, when we do this, when the finished product looks like this, we should get X.
Right. If
you're not doing that, then you got to be very careful. If you're going to put lipstick on it, don't expect to get what we're getting, because we know we're going to improve it. So we know what's going to go into that deal. So that's part of it. Like, what are you doing to then a house, because in the end we know for us to get this ARV we have to do X, and that's what you have to come up with.
And some of the key things that we started years ago, way before anybody else did, and I'm not even sure if people are even doing it now. Like we started putting granite or quartz countertops in a long time ago. We started putting vinyl plank in most of our rentals. Like most of the rental whole house is either hardwood finished floors or vinyl plank.
Yep.
Occasionally there's some carpet where it makes some sense, but we just don't like carpet. And just making sure that those two things, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but you'd be shocked at the difference in value you will get from and even like having tile tub surrounds.
Tile surrounds,
tile backsplashes in the kitchen. These things don't cost a lot of money, but they improve the value
significantly.
Way more. Like the ROI on just those finishes inside of a rental property, I think is something that, I'm not even sure it's calculatable.
I agree.
But anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this podcast on after repaired value.
That's right.
We could get into this all day long and talk about after. Yeah. This is where we live. This is what we do every day when we're looking at houses. We're putting in offers every single day on properties, and we want to know. The very first thing I want to know from anybody, what is the after repaired value? Second thing I want to know is, what are the repairs?
There you go. And
we'll get into repairs next. And what is this thing going to rent for? Like those are the key numbers. And if those numbers, I know exactly what I can pay for any house, really pretty much anywhere. But hopefully this brought you value. We haven't been asking for this much lately, but give us a 5-star review. Tell your friends about us. Share this on social media. We will be starting a TikTok soon. Look out for the Active Turnkey TikTok. That's going to be
huge.
Fun. It's going to be huge. We'll have some more fun on those, and then I think Amelia and our marketing team is going to probably take some of the places that we take out of these podcasts that.
We're going to do.
I think they're going to be doing it on purpose to make fun of us, but
if you guys makeup and maybe
Jared's going to do makeup. I'm not going to, but we're going to put some lipstick on Jared. So hope you guys are excited about that. But we're going to be having some fun with that. Also, I want to remind you guys, if you're local, we're having a local meetup group. We're starting once a month. It's going to be on a Thursday. It's either the second or third Thursday of the month, right here at 2701 West 45th Avenue in Gary, Indiana.
If you're listening to this, we're having one today.
I don't think anybody's going to be able to see this today. But hopefully this will go out between now and next month. But the next month, I actually have Kevin Hutnick, who's going to be on here. One of the fastest growing brokerages in the entire country. He owns Listing Leaders Corporate, and there's a bunch of stuff going on there. I don't even know how many agents they have now, but it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of agents. They've done, I don't even know how many billions of dollars worth of transactions, but and he's really going to talk about himself personally. He's not a public speaker. He's going to talk about himself personally.
Cool dude.
And just like, I remember before he had the brokerage. Like I knew him before that. And when he was just a realtor. And he's really done quite a bit in the last 10 years. I have a lot of respect for him. We have a local meetup group. We also have free monthly calls that you can just hop on. And you guys can go to goodsuccess.com to find information about those calls. Those calls are starting to ramp up. We're starting to get a lot more people on those. And those are for investors.
Subject matter do you guys
I would love for you guys to go back and just listen to some of the calls we have because they're on our website and you can listen to all the calls we've had. We've talked about anything from crypto to ATM machines to self-storage to economics. We had Anna Kelly on there. She did an amazing job on economics. And we're probably going to start bringing some of those to this podcast as well. We're going to probably start recording some of those over this and kind of maybe me and Jared introducing some of it and giving some of our outtakes because the calls have really turned into something very special, and I'm really proud of those calls. The next call we have is Mary Hart, and that one's going to be super fun in March as well. But anyways, I'm excited about that. Also, I'm excited about the Free For All event. If you guys want to come out and see us here in our office. Well, we do a VIP package. Just so you know, we are promoting the VIP package. You'll get the 3 books that I wrote. You'll also get free meals while you're here during the event. and a bunch of other good. You get guaranteed seating because I believe we're going to sell out this year, and we're not going to have enough room, so we might have to put people in an overflow room this year. But it's going to be a ton of fun. I promise you. If you're out for fun, if you want networking, and if you want deals, that's it. Like that's what we're going to do. Last year we also did karaoke. We also did
smashing hit.
It was awesome. Honestly, like I was shocked. I was expecting 2 or 3 people, and it was like 30 people sang. It was crazy. We also did horror stories. So if you have ever had a real estate horror story, we want you to be there.
Is that gonna be that's gonna be an annual thing?
Yeah, annual thing.
That's cool.
And this year I'm trying to get Andy Teasley. I'm not sure if anybody guys know him or not, but he does a thing called an exchangers meeting. And I'm trying to get him to come in maybe the night before and do one of those exchanger meetings here. So this is great. If you got small dollars, $2,000 here, you got IRA money, and like it could be small, it could be big. It's really cool. Like I just did this for the first time on this boat I just went on the Investor Addicts cruise, and I was really excited about it. I actually thought Jared would be excited about it too. Maybe they actually have these Zoom around the country. Didn't even know this. Every week they've got like these exchanger meetings that you can go on there, and it's kind of like an investment club almost kind of thing, and your people are exchanging things. Anyway, I thought it would be fun. We're going to do that this year as well. It's just going to be a lot of content, a lot of good speakers. And so anyways, goodsuccess.com. You can find out all the information there. If you're looking for us to help you build a rental portfolio, you can go right now to www.buyolsongroup.com. Pretty soon it's going to be One Group Network.com. Just so everybody knows. It's coming. It's coming fast.
Yeah.
But we're excited about that as well. You guys can also email Jared at jared@buyolsongroup.com, and he would love to get on the phone with you and just trying to figure out what your needs are and wants to be able to help you reach your financial freedom for whatever that means for you.
Thank you for joining us on the Active Turnkey podcast. Active Turnkey,
the best way to buy rentals. God bless.
Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.